Views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of this station, its owners, staff, or management. The following program is sponsored by Rob Warner at Guild Mortgage, NMLS number 825102. Welcome to the Happy Hour with Rob Warner, an hour of stimulating conversation adding value to your financial future. Rob brings helpful insights into many aspects of the mortgage and real estate industry. Now, here's your host, Rob Warner.
Happy Monday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Happy Hour with Rob Warner. I am Rob Warner with Guild Mortgage, and I hope all of you had a wonderful weekend and a very great Monday. I'm pleased to welcome two outstanding guests to my show today. One of them is Roger Burke, an attorney with John Rogers Burke Law Corporation, and Jennifer Ty from Remax Gold in Placerville. And it's going to be a good show, so stay with us. Here we go. Our first guest is going to be Roger. Hey, Roger, how's it going today?
Fantastic, Rob. It's great to be here.
It's good having you here. I'm really glad to have you on the show. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I've been practicing estate planning law for over 30 years, and I have a good significant background also in timeshare resorts. But we want to talk about estate planning today.
Oh, I learned something new. I didn't know that timeshare part.
I'm still married to my first wife. We have 6 children, 3 of whom we adopted in Mexico, and 15 grandchildren.
Wow, and I was kidding with you before the show. I wasn't far off the mark, was I? I was making a joke about that. Wow, that's incredible. That's great. So, what is estate planning?
It's all across the board, little or comprehensive. You really need to do comprehensive estate planning. The last couple of years, our predominant business has been in estate administration. And believe me, when somebody dies or becomes terminally ill, you find out where the gaps are. So you want to plan for those gaps.
So what's encompassed in estate planning? I mean, I wanted to bring up a portion of living trust, but before we get into that, can you kind of give an overview of everything connected with it, or is that going to be like on?
Well, that would be the whole show, but briefly, the 4 main documents are a living trust for a couple, a will, pour-over will for each individual that says everything I have goes into the trust, which is a safety net. We also put the guardianship provisions for children in there. Advanced health care directive to tell how you want to be treated if you can't communicate with your health care provider, and a power of attorney. There's several things that you can't cover by the trust, and you do a power of attorney for property management.
Remind me to come back to that power of attorney thing, because I didn't put that down as a question to ask you, but I want to touch on it real quick during the show, okay? So let's talk about living trusts. What's the benefit of a living trust?
Well, there's many benefits. If you have my brochure, the biggest benefit that people think about is avoiding probate. That is subjecting your estate to the publicity, the delays, and the cost of the court process when you die. Now, there's no probate if you leave everything to your spouse, but that may or may not be desirable. But there is if you leave it to anybody else. It also avoids the living probate called conservatorship if you become incapacitated during life. It's like a living probate. You're under court supervision if you can't direct your affairs.
Okay, boy, this is way. I wanted to stay kind of realistic, but I really want to know this. Go back a minute on that. Talk about something you're. What is the word for it? Incapacitated. You can't. Or what's?
Yeah, if you can't handle your financial affairs, there's different levels of being able to do that. Then somebody has to be appointed conservator by the court. It's a living probate. And we just actually today got a notice in a conservatorship where they have to make an annual report, and it's court supervised. It's expensive, it's public, it's time consuming.
But a trust avoids that?
Yes.
Oh.
A trust and a power of attorney.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. I didn't know that, because I have a situation where a friend of mine has something like similar situation going on in their family right now. Okay, this is good. I'm going to have to refer them to you.
Now, the thing about the power of attorney and the living trust is you have to set them up before you need them. It's like you can't wait till you smell smoke and then call State Farm or one of the insurance companies and say, I want to get some fire insurance. Because once you become incapacitated, then you can't set them up.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's so. I know I talked to you on the phone, and you were telling me sometimes you have a checklist where you actually review a trust, maybe that somebody else has even prepared, correct?
Yes.
What are some of the mistakes you see that others, I know we don't want to name names, but other attorneys, I guess, do attorneys always prepare trusts? Let's talk about that for a minute.
No, you hear ads all the time for do-it-yourself trusts for these different, I'll try not to name names either, but, do-it-yourself trusts. I had a lady bring one in that she'd gone online and did her trust, and I said, well, it's not too bad except you didn't really effectively leave your property.
Okay, so explain that. What do you mean?
Well, it wasn't clear who was supposed to get her property, which is the central feature of any estate plan.
Okay, so making sure you list that. What other mistakes do you see in trust?
Well, the most common is leaving a cash gift to a friend or a charity, besides the children or the usual objects of your bounty, and leaving a specified amount. Well, if your estate diminishes dramatically, that may be all there is. And so you should leave a cash gift like $10,000 or 5% of the estate, whichever is less.
Okay.
Little things like that are just, everybody that goes to law school thinks they can do a trust.
Okay.
And it's not true.
Okay. I have seen transactions where somebody, the parents pass away, and we were having this discussion before you came on the air about a successor trustee, I presume being the right terminology, for the next person in line to manage the estate.
Right.
I've seen property taxes become increased somehow when that happens. You were talking about that there's a way to avoid that happening.
Well, when there's a change in ownership under Prop 13, there's normally a change in assessment of property taxes, but there are exceptions to that. You can give or leave property to a spouse, and there's no change in ownership for property tax reassessment purposes. But you have to file the proper paperwork with the county assessor. There's also an exception for leaving property to children. Now, that's a little more complicated. And when you have a trust, the assessor looks through the trust to see who the beneficiary is, who has the right to the current enjoyment of the property. You need to make that clear to the assessor, or they're going to reappraise it. So there's just a myriad of complications that can enter into it. And then in the case of children, you die, is your other parents, the other parent's still alive, or there's a step parent. There's all kinds of complications that can enter into that have to be sorted through and explained carefully to the assessor.
So is there, if it's like I don't want to belabor this, but if there's a grandchild involved, would there be a tax repercussion then if it's not a direct child?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's where if the intervening child is dead and a grandparent dies, and their child, who is the parent of the grandchild, has died, there's an exception for passing property to the grandchild. That's where those exceptions or those complications really come to the fore.
Oh, my gosh. Is there a way to do all that up front and kind of cover your bases on all that?
No, you have to wait to see who dies first.
Oh, okay, so you just have to wait and file the proper form.
Yeah, at the time.
Okay, so that's real important then. And you get involved at that point in time, I'm presuming,
right,
with your clients, correct?
Right.
You don't just leave them hanging. They're not. When somebody passes away, they're going to contact you.
Well, hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah, call your attorney early and often.
There you go. There you go. So give out some of your contact info before we get with the show more often, or going on with the show, because you said you had a brochure that's online. I want folks to have that information now, early on.
Yeah, my website is RosevilleEstatePlanning.com with hyphens between Roseville-estate-planning.com. And my brochure and a lot of information are on my website. My phone number is 916-784-7030, and I'm on Highland Point in Roseville.
Okay, hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Happy Hour. I'm Rob Warner with Guild Mortgage. We're joined again by Roger Burke, an attorney with Rogers Burke Law Corporation. We were talking about estate planning. We were talking about living trusts, talking about some of the tax ramifications of somebody passing away, and what happens with your taxes? Do the property taxes go up? Anyway, where were we on that? Just having constant contact with your attorney, at least once a day, right? No.
No, I've had people call me 6 months to a year after somebody passes away, or recently even 2 years. They just didn't think they had to call me, and there's things that weren't done, like notifying the assessor, things that are required, although I've never seen anybody go to jail. Rob, if I could go back to one of your earlier questions, the advantages of a living trust, there are quite a few in addition to avoiding probate and conservatorship, like quicker distribution of assets or payments to beneficiaries, particularly leaving assets in trust for irresponsible beneficiaries so they don't just waste it, and incentivizing education and things like that, and preventing court control of minors' inheritances. There's just a whole list of advantages. And then you mentioned mistakes. One of the biggest mistakes is not funding the trust, that is, transferring property into the trust.
Can you elaborate? So in other words, somebody creates a trust and they think they've done everything at that point, right? But they forget to put the property into the trust. Am I saying that
right? That's right. Like you do a deed to your house and convey that to yourselves as trustees of your trust. Yeah. You transfer your accounts, your major bank accounts, not your grocery account, major bank accounts, investment accounts. You transfer those to yourselves as trustees of your trust. Retirement accounts aren't transferred to the trust. They are to be held individually, but you designate the beneficiary, usually your spouse. Then if you have adult responsible children, they're the backup beneficiary or contingent beneficiaries. But you always want to put the trust in as the last beneficiary in case everybody dies in a common accident, because if you don't have a ascertainable beneficiary on your retirement accounts, they have to be probated.
Oh, okay. Wow. A lot to know, that's for sure. Can you talk about wills? You went into it a little bit. Well, no, you didn't really. Can you talk a little bit about a will?
Well, I mentioned a will as part of an overall estate plan. It's called a pour-over will that says everything I have goes into my trust that I just set up. And that's a safety net in case you have something you didn't transfer to the trust. That puts it in the trust. California is very liberal on upholding trusts and transfers to trusts. So if you have some indication like a pour-over will or a list of assets on the trust that says this goes into the trust, I've had good luck over the years. For instance, General Electric stock. Somebody listed it on Schedule A to the trust and says, I want this to be in the trust, and General Electric has honored that. If they don't, you can go to court and do what's called a Hegstead case, Hegstead petition, and say, look, this person said they want this in the trust, and the courts are very favorable in California about upholding that and saying, okay, here's an order, this is in the trust.
Okay, so a pour-over will, that's the only purpose of it, really, then, for that function.
Right.
There'd be no other reason to have a will, really, if you had a trust.
Well, we also use that to designate guardianship of the person of minor children.
What, the will?
The will, and sometimes burial instructions.
Why? Why the will?
Because it has the formalities that are recognized. See, you can't leave your kids in the trust. You have to designate individuals to be guardians, and that is court supervised. There's no way to get around that.
Oh, okay, because they're minors.
Right.
So the court still has their hands in a pie somewhere around there.
Right.
Oh, okay. What's so bad about probate?
Cost, delay, and publicity. We often think of cost and delay, but it also makes everything you own a matter of public record. And there are those who prey upon widows or people who have lost loved ones and they're vulnerable. They can go down to the courthouse and look up the assets and then call up and offer to invest them for you and things like that. Just a quick story on the cost. I did a trust years ago for a gentleman who was then buying a house up in Lake of the Pines, $850,000 house. And he told his broker he wanted it in his trust. And he said, well, the papers are already made out. Let's do it. And he said, okay, I'll call my attorney and put it in after we buy it. Well, he was in the hospital because he was alcoholic, and he never spent a night in his house, and died in the hospital. He signed all the papers and bought the house and then died. Well, we had to probate the house. Now, the probate fee is based on a percentage of the value of the property, and he borrowed $550,000 to buy the house, but the probate schedule looks at it as an $850,000 house. So the fee for the attorney on the probate would have been about $21,000. But I wrote the will, and I put in the will that the attorney only gets an hourly fee. So it cost about $7,000 to probate that house.
Oh, well.
Instead of the statutory $21,000.
Thank goodness you at least had the will, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So that is the main, well, and then the court's involved too, right, on a probate?
Yeah, and that's a headache.
Okay. So you don't have any court involved when you're in a trust, right? It just kind of it's a living entity.
You shouldn't have.
Okay.
Just one of the current trends in trust planning is called the trust advisor or trust protector, and that's somebody independent of both families, if it's a couple, that you appoint to watch over things. You know, somebody like a financial advisor or somebody like you, if you're not part of the family. And that's to solve disputes, make sure the trustee's doing his or her job, things like that.
Okay. Because I don't want to leave this part out of I don't know how much time we have left right now, just a few minutes. What is the advantage of working with your law firm?
Well, I've got a page in my brochure that sets that forth, and one of the things I list in there is, as I've reviewed other estate plans, I've found 35 provisions in the 4 main documents that are unique with our law firm.
35? Was that the list you gave me earlier that I went, oh my gosh, how am I going to get that in a 22-minute radio show?
Well, part of it might be.
So can you touch on a couple of the points maybe that would be important for our listeners?
Well, like one that stands out in my mind, in the Advanced Healthcare Directive, I write the only one that gives the client the option to say, if euthanasia becomes legal, I want it considered.
Okay, that's something you put in there?
Yeah, well, if they want it. It's about 50-50.
Oh.
I don't personally favor it, but I try to make things available to people that might want it.
Touch on a couple others, if you don't mind.
Caught me by surprise. Well, the one about cash gifts, that's pretty unusual. One that's notoriously deficient, and it's one of the advantages of working with a trust, is protecting irresponsible beneficiaries. And I have about a half or a full page on that. Things like if they're incarcerated, if they have no credit history or poor credit history, you can't hold a job, no net worth, going through a divorce, addicted to substances, controlled substances, alcohol, marijuana, within the last 2 years, or gambling. Then when it comes time, like when they're 30 and otherwise their share would be distributed, the trustee can hang on to it and said, Mom and Dad said, if you're in this condition, I hang on to this and I support you and I take care of your medical, things like that.
For how long?
As long as they're addicted or...
Okay, so that person would have the control over that then. Is that pretty much bulletproof, or could that person try to...
It's pretty bulletproof.
It is?
Yeah.
So they couldn't say, hey, I'm going to sue you and get, control back over my money, right?
Right.
Because the court, what would the court think? They would know the reason why that was put in there, right?
Right.
Okay. So what about married couples? I see in here, but this is like huge estates, marital trust, Q-tip marital trust. I don't know if we even want to get into that.
That's AB trust planning, or I call it the survivor trust and the family trust. Spouses agree, and they usually do agree for one reason or another, that when one of us dies, the decedent's half of the estate goes into an irrevocable trust. It's there to support the survivor, to maintain a accustomed manner of living, but it's guaranteed to go to the kids or whoever they agreed that it was going to go to, because it becomes irrevocable upon the first death. Now, back in the 90s, when the state tax exemption was fairly low, that protected the estate against estate tax, because the irrevocable portion isn't taxed when the survivor dies. And frequently, bulking up the estate in the hands of the survivor would cause estate tax, whereas if you divide it, it wouldn't. That's a big saving. Most of us don't have those kinds of estates anymore, that exceed $5.5 million.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But that's the estate tax benefit. The practical benefit is that the survivor can't divert the decedent's portion. Now, an actual case I had about 15 years ago, a lady called me from up in the valley, and her husband had just died. He left everything to her for her life to support her, and then it went to his 4 kids by his first marriage. And I literally said to her, "You don't sound very old." She's 4 years older than his oldest son. And because the first wife didn't do A/B trust planning, the husband could leave everything to the new young stepmother, and his kids get nothing. Statistically, his oldest son won't see a penny of his parents' money because he will die before the stepmother does.
And there's nothing that can be done about that.
And then the biggest selling point is that irrevocable trust is protected from the creditors of the surviving spouse. That's one of the few valid asset protection devices.
Oh, so if she gets into legal ramifications, they can't go after it.
Right.
Huh. Anything else? We got like 3 minutes left. Is there something that you feel is really important for the audience to know about? Can you think of any offhand?
Yeah, my number is 784-7030.
I like that one. There you go. But seriously, are there I try to make this real estate related.
Yeah, one of my favorites is understanding community and separate property. Community property is produced by a community asset, which is what you are the day you get married. So your wages and salary are community property. Your spouse has the right to control and manage half of it. What you inherit is separate property, and I give every couple my facts of life talk. You take separate property and you have to do something to make it community property. But if you do, and your spouse runs off with his secretary in 2 weeks, he gets half of your inheritance. And I told that to one couple, and the guy said, he hasn't seen my secretary. Like, no problem.
Okay, so that what would you have done in that instance, though? Just make sure that people allocate properly?
Well, when I represent a couple, I say, I can't favor one or the other, and don't one of you call me up and tell me to keep something secret from your spouse. I can't do that. So I just tell them to talk. They have to decide between themselves if one of them gets an inheritance, if they're going to make it community property. I can't advise them to do it or not do it.
Very good. Well, let's give out your information one more time, your website. Okay, we have 1 minute left. So this is Roger Burke, an attorney with John Rogers Burke Law Corporation in Roseville. And what is your website again?
Website is roseville-estate-planning.com.
Give Roger a call. He comes highly recommended. I have a client that had wonderful things to say about him. Anyway, stay with us. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to the Happy Hour. I'm Rob Warner with Guild Mortgage, and I'm happy to bring to you Jennifer Ty from RE/MAX in Placerville. How's it going today, Jennifer?
Great. Glad to be here, Rob. Thanks for having me.
So, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, or tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Married with children, Aquarius, Capricorn, cusp. No, I'm kidding. I've been in real estate for a little over 10 years, and I started my career in financial services prior to that. I am married with children. My husband's a general contractor, and a little known fact is I bought my first home at the age of 19.
Oh, good for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that. So
Sure.
What brought you to work in the field of real estate?
Well, I started, as I said, in financial services when I was 19 at Franklin Templeton Investments. Spent some time in every aspect of that. And when I was about, 40. No, actually, it would be 30-ish. About 10 years ago, 30-something. I got into real estate because I was working with my husband on project managing an investment property that we had purchased, and I had my real estate license. I seem to have a tendency to collect licenses with a Series 6 and 63 and life agent license and all of those things. So I had collected my real estate license along the way. and was working with an agent, a realtor who had listed the home, and I decided it was a lot of fun to hold the open houses and give my input, which whether it was welcome or not, on marketing and help sell the house. It was exciting to me.
Oh, very good. Yeah, I ran across you one time at one of your investment properties. I think that the both
Most
of you
likely.
were doing a rehab on.
Yes, we've done a few.
So it works out good that you can do your own. Your husband can do the rehabs, and you can represent them on the sales, huh?
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes.
Sometimes it's not in our best interest to represent ourselves on properties.
Oh, really?
The legalities of things. There's a lot of exposure to the legalities if you represent yourself as a realtor.
Oh, I guess so, huh? Because you're responsible for everything then, not only representing the client, but...
Just imagine a for sale by owner, and when those guys try to get in there without any experience and sell a home.
Yeah. So what is your area of expertise in real estate?
Well, I tell it like it is, pretty honest and forthright when it comes to giving advice and helping people decide what their options are and really leading them to understand how to decide what their options might be as a buyer or a seller.
And what sets you apart then from other realtors? I mean, does that set you apart? What?
Well, that along with many other things. My experience and background coming from financial services, I have a way of looking at the full picture. For example, if someone's looking to buy a home and they're a first-time home buyer, they're thinking about the now and getting their keys. And maybe this particular home is not the right home for them because they want to start a family in 2 years, or they have other plans. Maybe they're elderly and they're looking at a 2-story on 10 acres that needs to be taken care of. So pointing out those things that maybe are not so obvious to a buyer or a seller when they're looking for a home and giving them that different perspective to help them understand the long-term ramifications. I think that experience coming from the financial services industry and looking at the bigger picture helps people to make good investments.
Do clients listen to you when you give that advice? I'm just curious.
Oh, it leads to great conversations, that's for sure. It's not necessarily the end-all, be-all, you should do this or that. It's, hey, have you thought of maybe this perspective, or did you think this through? It's the same thing as, maybe as a realtor, I see the roof is might be needing to be replaced, and maybe the buyer got so excited about the pretty kitchen that they didn't quite look at the other aspects of the property.
So you point that out to them and tell them possibly what the cost could be, and hey.
Of course.
So that's good information. That's
Absolutely.
Great to have somebody like you in their court then. What advice do you have for buyers and sellers right now in this market that we're going through?
Oh, well, this market, that's a different question than what's the advice
okay.
for buyers and sellers.
Okay, well, let's start without this market. What's the advice you normally have for buyers and sellers?
I think it's very valuable and important to look for a realtor who's experienced, who knows their market, which comes down to really working with a local realtor. I've seen the difference in my 10 years of practicing real estate, of working with an out-of-area realtor who may write an offer on a property that's not their area of expertise, and quite honestly, they miss things.
Especially up in the foothills.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm assuming most of your transactions are up in the foothills, right?
Yes, primarily El Dorado County, although I have gone halfway to Tahoe and all the way over to Loomis and all the way down to Saratoga.
So it's just easier to work in an area that you're really familiar with, right? That's
for many reasons. And I say work with a local realtor as a buyer and a seller, yet I just said I worked out of area, right?
Right.
And it just ended up being that way when you build that rapport with the client and they start in El Dorado County and then they may be looking in, for example, Loomis or Rockland area, find out that that's a better area for them. There's a lot of driving involved.
Yeah, there is.
Yes, and although, Loomis, Sacramento, Roseville, the areas that are outlying, they're not quite as unique as rural properties, as you mentioned. El Dorado County has a lot of septic and land issues and gold claims down in Coloma where the property lines go wonky on us. They take a sharp left turn and then back to the right.
Well, I'm sure it's a lot more difficult as a listing agent to be trying to list a property that's out of the area than it is for you to represent a buyer that wants to look out of the area, right? Because you would have to really know your area if you're going to try to price a home for somebody, right?
Sure. I mean, we can all pull analytics and pull pricing for a property anywhere if we have access to the MLS, and you can apply your knowledge that way. But when your sign goes up in the yard and there's a top producing agent who handles hundreds of transactions in that area, they're going to draw more attention than your sign if you're out of area.
All right. Well, talk about what's going on in real estate right now currently. And I guess up in the foothill areas, right? Because a lot of listeners I'm seeing a lot more people wanting to move up to the foothill areas.
Yeah, sure.
Are you seeing that now?
We do have a lot of buyers coming from out of areas, Southern California and the Bay Area coming up and relocating into El Dorado County. So that is for sure. What's going on in El Dorado County? We have a serious lack of inventory. That being said, I found 5 houses to show a client today, so that was pretty cool. Kept us busy.
5 houses.
Yes, 5 was a good number when there's low inventory. Yeah, so we do have a lack of inventory. Pricing is stable. Rates, as you can attest to, are hanging in there.
They're staying low, which is helping everything out right now.
Exactly. Our biggest problem right now is the buyers finding the right home that works for them. There are homes, but there's not a ton of them to choose from.
Well, as you know, my wife and I live in Shingle Springs, so this is a personal question. Mm-hmm. The Bay Area folks and Southern Cal folks that are moving up to the foothills, what are they wanting the land? What's their main reason for wanting to move?
Getting out of the city, retiring to an area that's a little slower pace than what they're used to, taking their money from the Bay Area and running and buying what they can buy up in our area. Their money goes much further.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that happening in Roseville and Rockland, Roger, in your neck of the woods. A lot of Bay Area money coming in and buying these houses because they're selling their $1 million house and coming in with $500,000 and buying a house cash.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still seeing a lot of cash offers or not right now?
We do see some cash, yeah. I just closed one cash a few weeks ago, and it's a good combination of cash and financing.
Good, yeah. I don't like to see when it's all cash heavy, you know what I mean? Because it takes the poor person that's trying to work hard and that needs financing out of the equation when they do that, and so it's not very fun.
Yeah, as a lender, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I don't get any now. It's not just looking after my pocketbook, but it does seem to distort the market when you see a lot of cash coming in and driving prices up because it's not reality,
Cash is king.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can absolutely have a cash deal close, and it changes or sways the market conditions in that particular neighborhood.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. Mm-hmm. So suddenly your comps start going up, and it makes it harder and harder for the person. Are you seeing? I do USDA, as you well know. Do you see a lot of people using USDA up in the foothills right now?
USDA, FHA, yes, we see a lot of that. The challenge with USDA, as you know, is the condition of the property has to be pretty much impeccable. It has to meet all of those health and safety guidelines and not have outbuildings and not have dry rot. And in El Dorado County, we have a lot of decks. We have a lot of rural properties with outbuildings. So USDA isn't agreeable with those types of properties. It doesn't meet their guidelines.
I know. I always have people asking me about it, and I'm trying to, it's not that I don't mind doing it for them, but I try to present what you're telling me as well, that, hey, this is not, doesn't work on every property. Do you have a backup contingent loan that'll work for you? Because don't just go looking for a property that fits the loan. I know it's a great loan, but, you have to buy the house you want to live in. Agreed?
True. It does become a challenge, though, when you're limited to certain types of financing.
So if you had a crystal ball, what would it tell you?
Oh, if I had a crystal ball, what would it tell me? It would tell me that buying a home at any time is a good investment. That's the conversation that I have quite often is, well, what is the market going to do? Is the pricing going to go up? Is it going to go down? What does Zillow say?
Yeah, what does Zillow say?
What does
Don't
Zillow
get me on the Zillow topic again.
Let's not talk about Zillow. But that crystal ball would say any time you can invest in a home is a good time. We are not in the 80s where the rates were sky high. I'm sure you can speak to that. 8, 10, 13%.
Yeah, higher. Keep going.
Keep going.
18, 19. Well, I came in after Jimmy Carter, but 21%, I think some rates were that high.
You're dating yourself.
Yeah. Oh, no.
But where are we now as far as rates? I mean, you can say these things, I can't.
Well,
right?
they're low. I don't like to post rates because then I have to give out all the APR information and be compliant. But you're in the low 4s right now.
Which is what, a quarter? It's like 25% of what it was way back when.
You're in the low 4s, and everything's been hanging tight. Even with the Fed doing a couple of rate increases, it's affected credit cards and short-term loans, but it hasn't really affected the long-term loans right now.
Mm-hmm.
So
your
anyway,
money can go farther now.
We've got like 1 minute before our break. Give out your contact information, please, Jennifer.
Well, at 916-952-1665 is my phone number, and I'm with Remax Gold in Placerville. My email is butterflyonthemove@gmail.com, and I only give you that because you'll remember.
Butterflyonthemove@gmail. Very good. Well, hang with us, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Happy Hour. I'm Rob Warner with Guild Mortgage, and we're being joined by Jennifer Ty at Remax in Placerville. And Jennifer, we were talking about the crystal ball, and you were saying it's always a good time to buy. And I happen to agree with you, by the way, with one little caveat, which you already know, and that is if you can afford your payment and you can afford that house, then yes, get into the market.
That's what we have you lenders for.
Right? Because if you can afford it, why are you paying rent? Buy a home, even if, don't be worrying about 6 months. What's the property value going to do in a year? You can sit there. I'm guilty of that analysis to paralysis. You can overanalyze a situation.
Absolutely.
To where you never, I've seen people wait 2-3 years and they should have just bought, and then they're kicking themselves that they didn't buy.
Absolutely. And it's difficult to give the analogy of if you were invested in the stock market, in order to win in the stock market, you have to be in and be invested. Well, a lot of our first-time home buyers or millennials or younger, they're not thinking about stock market. They're not thinking about being invested in anything.
But yet if they bought a home, at least they'd start earning equity and they'd have an investment, hopefully a long-term investment, which is if you buy real estate that way, you usually can't lose. But if you're going to buy it thinking you're going to make $100,000 in 6 months, that's another story.
True, and that mortgage interest deduction is very valuable, especially for those individuals who are single wage earners making a ton of money, or they're married and don't have kids, those lovely little deductions. Having that mortgage interest write-off is very valuable.
It is.
Way better than renting.
So what is one little known secret that you can share regarding real estate?
Well, that's on the flip side of the first-time home buyers. So for those buyers that are age 55 and older, in El Dorado County, it's a little known secret that Prop 90 allows individuals to sell their primary residence and transfer their original tax base into our county. El Dorado County is one of the few counties that will accept that tax base from any other county in California. So to give an example, to apply that, if you have someone who's living in San Jose or San Francisco and they bought their home 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and bought it for a modest price of $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, and they sell it today for the millions that it's worth in the Bay Area, they can transfer that tax base of that original purchase, say $500,000, come into El Dorado County, pay cash for a $750,000 house, and still only pay taxes on the $500,000 from their original home.
Yeah, I heard that. A lot of people are balking about that, right? Because they think there's revenue being lost for the county.
It's gone in front of the Board of Supervisors a few times, and I think the main conversation with the supervisors comes down to what does El Dorado County want to be when they grow up? Do we want to attract retirees or pre-retirees? Do we want to attract young families? What do we want to attract in El Dorado County? So that particular Prop 90 comes up every year or so, and they vote it in or out. And last time it was passed to continue. There's a lot of realtors and a lot of clients that we've helped that show up at that Board of Supervisors meeting and say, hey, this is beneficial. And the biggest argument is, someone moves up to El Dorado County that's 55, 60 years old, then all of a sudden their kids are moving up and their grandkids are moving up, or they've moved up to be closer to their family. And they're spending money rehabilitating, rehabbing those houses, making them better, spending money at Home Depot, using local contractors.
Very good. You brought up a point I never considered, actually, because I've been kind of paying attention. And that is that the retired person moves up there, and the younger or the other family members start moving up there, too.
Absolutely.
So it brings more revenue into the county.
Absolutely. There's been discussion about it taxing our transportation system, but those individuals are usually pre-retiree or retiree. They're not commuting.
So let's switch gears completely, okay? I love doing that on this show, by the way, because I know you're a big music lover. And, you know, on July 3rd, I did a Memorial Day, or I mean,
4th of
Independence
July.
Day. I'm sorry. I'm mixing the two holidays up. 4th of July commemorative show, and I had Lauren Murphy on, who sang the national anthem.
Yes.
What's your connection to Lauren?
Lauren Murphy and I met years ago when she was looking for a place to have her photo shoot for her album release and her CD cover. And my in-laws have a property where they built this pretty awesome 1800s saloon. It's a whole town that's kind of 1800s, and it was absolutely perfect for her CD cover called El Dorado. And I can't remember how we originally met, but we did connect with that premise. I met through a friend and said, hey, I've got the perfect place for you, and ended up having dinner and chatting. And she's a musician, obviously, and she was married to, her husband was lead singer of Zero. So that kind of goes back into the 60s and 70s time frame, the music that I love.
So you involve your real estate with music as well, don't you?
I do.
Can you share about that?
Every chance I get. It's a cleverly designed tax deduction when I can throw some really good music events. No, really, I do love music, and I have a lot of friends that are amazing musicians, very talented people that play big venues, and they're on tour, and they're right here and a resource for me. So I will produce events and festivals and bring in those musicians from the Bay Area and locally and meet more people.
It's an excellent way of doing it. You have you call yourself Taiwan. Am I saying this right?
Taiwan Productions.
Taiwan Productions. You have some stuff coming up, didn't you?
We
do. Have some events coming up? What do you have coming up?
We have Johnny Mojo, who is well known in the music industry. Started as a blues musician and has gradually gone on to amazing things. And he is ingrained in the Grateful Dead community and plays a lot of that style of music, as well as jam band, and he has his band Achilles Wheel. I have Johnny Mojo with a few musicians from the Bay Area that are very well known, that are playing at the Nugget Campground in Placerville this coming Sunday. Starts at 3 o'clock for the gates, and we'll have music until 7.
Where is that? I've never been there.
It's a private campground that nobody will really be able to find, but you can find it on Facebook if you look up Taiwan Productions, and it's TEIE, Taiwan Productions. And the Nugget Campground is right off of 193, just outside of Placerville. It's about 3 to 5 miles away.
Oh, so it's over
from Main
there.
Street.
So it's open to the public, this event?
It is open to the public. It's a $15 cover charge to cover music, and it's right there on the river. So it's like a river park. And this particular event is a lead-up event for our festival that we're throwing in September.
Then talk about that.
September 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, we have a 3-day festival, and it will be at the river at the Nugget. It's next to Chili Bar Reservoir, so that might ring a bell with a few people. And the festival, again, it's over 3 days. It's camping, and there's a lot of music that is Grateful Dead-esque.
Grateful Dead-esque.
Grateful Dead-esque. So a lot of bands that have come from the Grateful Dead community, a lot of musicians, as well as Bob Dylan cover band, the Allman Brothers. We have a lot of good old rock and roll.
Oh, okay. There was some other event, too, wasn't there, that you were going to have, but was there not?
I'm always working on some sort of event. I know that I'm currently pursuing the option of throwing a Food Trucks in the Foothills event at somewhere in Placerville, and it'll have live music, and it's a fundraiser. I always like to pair up with nonprofit organizations that like to be part of the music scene and have us bring some people and bring awareness to their organization and raise money.
I think that's really important, and while we're talking about that, I'm going to make a little plug on the air because I'm interested in folks like that too. if there's nonprofits out there and you need to have your show or your event mentioned on the air, I'd love to do it for you because that's really important.
Absolutely.
And I know you've been doing this for a while with nonprofits, correct?
Yes. It all started with birthday parties. It's always a fun way to celebrate birthdays, and then building on that, bringing an audience and creating the partnership with nonprofits, it makes it a reason to throw a party.
Well, give out some of your contact info. We have like 3 minutes left, so give out your contact info, and then we'll go back and talk about a couple more things on real estate real quick before we end the show.
Okay. Jennifer Tai with Remax Gold and Taiwan On Productions, and my number is 916-952-1665. You can find me on Facebook, and last name is tricky with all those vowels, T-E-I-E. So look it up, and I'm one of few.
Jennifer's top notch as far as real estate up in the foothills, folks. So, give her a call. What else? Do you have any other little pointers you can point out right now that come to mind on real estate right now before we end this show?
If you're thinking about buying or selling, it's always great to interview more than one person. Don't always take it for granted that your brother, your sister, your mother, your friend is going to do the best job for you. I think it's really important to know what you're getting and to interview people that, those professionals that are the right people for the job. And I can't say enough about experience. And I think Roger said, not everyone with a law degree is suited to do a trust. Not everyone with a real estate license is suited to help you with a transaction.
I know the family member thing. That's a little touchy subject.
It
because
is.
I get that all the time on the loan side, where somebody says, "Oh, my family member is in lending," and it's like, okay.
I just had a client come from her friend who was in lending who couldn't accomplish the mission of getting her a loan. So friends are great, but it has to be the right fit for what you're looking for and what you need to do.
Yeah, I know. It's a tough one, huh? Because
It
you want to
is.
be loyal to your family, but maybe they don't have the expertise.
I've referred my family to other individuals who can better suit them and better help them. You have to know your audience and know your skills, really.
Well, I commend you for doing that.
It's not all about the paycheck.
No, it's not, and that's what's good about you. That you care about people, and that's what counts. Anyway, we're winding up the show. Hope to have everybody back next week. And thank you both for being on the show with me today.
Thank you.
And everybody have a wonderful week. We'll see you next Monday.
Guild Mortgage Company is an equal housing lender. NMLS 3274. Licensed by the Department of Business Oversight under the California Residential Mortgage Lending Act. Rob Warner. NMLS 825102. All loans subject to underwriter approval. Terms and conditions may apply. Subject to change without notice.